Today, President Obama is announcing a much more comprehensive plan to support the new governments in Egypt and Tunisia that includes billions of dollars in debt forgiveness and loan guarantees. The U.S. is also expecting to announce new sanctions on Syria, which has been violently cracking down on protesters there. Joining us is the former ambassador to Israel, Egypt, and Syria, currently head of the Baker Institute at Rice University, and that is, of course, Ambassador Edward Djerejian. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Ambassador. Quite an impressive mouthful as well of the offices that you have held. We're waiting for President Obama to begin speaking. When he announces further sanctions on Syria, the question is, why are we not withdrawing our ambassador? And really, what more can be done in terms of cutting off very limited relations with Syria to begin with?
Well, I don't think we can manage the crisis inside Syria in any direct manner. What we can use is our influence and do it in a manner that is with a coalition of our friends and allies who together can put pressure on the regime to stop and cease firing on its own people and using violence to suppress these nonviolent demonstrations and protests in Syria. I think it's very important for Washington to collaborate with our European allies and countries like Turkey and Prime Minister Erdogan, who happens to have a relationship with the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, and build on a collective approach to Syria to not only end the violence, but to get on with political and economic reforms that the people are demanding.
Right, and those reforms really have not been met. When does the United States take a stand and say that leaders should step down? We've done that in Libya. It took a while before the U.S. took that position in Egypt. With Bashar al-Assad, why isn't the United States calling for that?
Because the international community has been giving President Bashar al-Assad some leeway because he has been talking the talk but not walking the walk on instituting political and economic reforms in his country. The international community has been trying to urge him to do that beyond just rhetoric. But every day that goes on with the violence in the streets of Syria and no real reform movement being initiated, he's losing his political capital.
Yeah, and I ask you about Syria and the lack of further action there, because we are seeing outreach on the economic front to these nascent governments in Egypt and in Tunisia with the extension of aid or changes of aid packages there. I mean, is limited economic assistance enough of a statement on this by this country to offset the lack of action elsewhere?
I think it's a very important statement, and how the economic assistance is directed to help the people of these countries create more functional economies, create jobs, to give help in terms of alleviating some of their debt burden, improving the economy, and also helping these countries, as we are in civil society, how to organize elections and build political. All of this is very important. And there's one very important point, I think, and I hope what the president will say today is explain to the American people and to the world that the United States has to follow a differentiated policy country by country. You've mentioned what we're doing differently in Syria, what we're doing differently in Tunisia and Egypt and elsewhere. But the president will, I hope, explain how we have to balance, as the United States, our values and our principles, democracy. What's happening in the streets in the Arab world is part of the arc of history that we're all about: liberty, freedom. But at the same time, we have to safeguard our national security interests, so each country will be approached differently.
And Mr. Ambassador, thank you for giving us your expectations ahead of the president. We're still waiting to make that address we're talking about. Very interesting to see economic development being linked to democratic reform.